I'm wondering what habit or habits have contributed most to your ability to continue learning and improving your investment decisions in a changing business and financial environment.
I would say that, at least in my case, I haven't been continually learning in terms of the basic principles. You always learn a little more about given techniques, or I learn more about some industries over time, and therefore maybe I've widened the universe in which I can operate, although more funds narrows it back down, unfortunately. But I know more about businesses than I knew 20 years ago or 40 years ago. I haven't really changed the principles. The last change, the basic principles are still Ben Graham. They were affected in a significant way by Charlie and Bill Fisher in terms of looking at the better businesses, but I didn't leave Graham behind on that. And I really haven't learned any new fundamental principles, but I may have learned a little bit more about how business operates over time. And there's really nothing. I mean, you ought to get a investment framework that comes straight from, in my view, from the intelligent investor and from Phil Fisher. More from the intelligent investor, actually. And then I think you ought to learn everything you can about industries and businesses where you think you have the ability to get your mind around them if you work at them. And with that arsenal, you'll do very well. And if you've got the temperament for the business.
One of the great paradoxes of inventing at a high level is that you need to be an expert in your domain area, and you need to have a beginner's mind. You absolutely need both of those things. The world is too complex to actually just be a beginner. So, I can't, no matter how inventive I am, I can't go invent a new kind of brain surgery. You have to be a neurosurgeon. You have to already know all there is to know about brain surgery and then take it to the next level. The problem is, for many people, by the time they become true experts, they've lost that ability to see things in a fresh way. They've lost the beginner's mind. And so that's another thing, you always need to be stepping back and saying, if I'm an expert in launch vehicles or whatever it is, I need to step back and say, okay, if I were looking at this for the first time, what would I be seeing and noticing? These are just some of the things you need to do to be innovative.
It's very important to seek out, to actively seek out and listen very carefully to negative feedback. And this is something that people tend to avoid because it's painful.
Yeah.
But I think this is a very common mistake, is to not actively seek out and listen to negative feedback.
Where do you do that? Do you go into forums? Do you go into Twitter? Like, what are your areas where you go to look for feedback on, let's say, the Tesla?
Well, it's like everyone I talk to is, in fact, when friends get a product, I say, look, don't tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like.
Right.
And because otherwise your friend is not going to tell you what he doesn't like.
Right.
He's going to say, oh, I love this and that, and then leave out the this is the stuff I don't like list. Because he wants to be your friend, doesn't want to offend you. So you really need to sort of coax negative feedback. And you know that if somebody is your friend, or at least not your enemy, and they're giving you negative feedback, then they may be wrong, but it's coming from a good place. And sometimes even your enemies give you good negative feedback.
How do you identify what's next?
I just read a lot, right? I'm just one of those guys that just consumes information.
On what, the internet or where?
Everything. Yeah, everything, anywhere I can get it, I just try to learn.
And you've always been this way?
Yeah, I've always been like a knowledge geek, where it mostly tech, but it could be anything. Anything business related, technology related, marketing related, culture related. I want to try to stay on top of it. Steve Jobs had this one quote that really stuck with me. He said, everything's a remix. And if you look at the early days of the Apple products, there was this company back in the day called Xerox PARC. And Xerox came out with the first mouse-driven PC. But their marketing sucked, and they had no idea what they were doing. No one knew what they were about. Steve Jobs came in, a little bit of this, a little bit, remixed, and bam, right? All of a sudden, you got Apple, and then a Macintosh, and then
he made it sexier.
Yeah, and then even he got fired, right? He got fired from that company, and then they had to bring him back to make it work. And so, for me, the more you learn, the more you know how to remix. And that's what this is all about. So, how do you go from YouTube, which was the first platform for video that got big, to Instagram, to Snapchat, and know, okay, do I want to be on Discover? Do I want to be on Reels? Do I want to be on TikTok? And if I do this, how's YouTube going to treat me? And all the decisions you guys have got to make on a daily basis. And the fact that, like we were just talking, you created all these products and you want it to be organic. That's a business decision too. And then you have to learn by trial and error, right? You were curious about what might work. Obviously you're walking proof of what does work, right? And now you've got to be able to continue to make those decisions, because in this business with all the margins on these products, everybody's coming at you all the time, right?
Yeah.
And they think they can do the exact same thing, but it's not that easy. But for me, it's like, that's why I try to stay ahead. Because whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's VR, whether it's crypto, whether it's metaverse, all these things may not be prime time yet, but I want to know when they will be, and I want to be out front when they are.
Knowing when to quit and knowing when to give up on something there's no perfect answer to that, but it's really challenging to even get that approximately correct. I think most people give up on things way too early. So the mistake that most people make is they try something, it does not immediately work. You see this particularly in young entrepreneurs. It does not immediately work. After 7 weeks, they say, you know what, I tried this thing, it's just not meant to be, and I have too many other projects, and so they immediately give up. And you kind of, the satirical version of this is people that are 23 and have started 14 startups because they give up on everyone before it could ever possibly be successful. These things are really hard. They take a very long time. There are a lot of critics. There are a lot of people who say this thing sucks, it's gonna fail, it's really stupid. And then also there's like what at YC we call the trough of sorrow, where no one even bothers to say it sucks because no one cares at all. And that is at least as demotivating. Most of the founders that I have spent a lot of time with that have gone on to be super successful spent a very long time on their idea when a lot of other people would have given up. And either people said it sucks or people said nothing at all. And a framework that I have for when to give up and when to keep working is it should be an internal, not an external decision. If people aren't using it or if people are saying it's bad, that alone is not a reason to give up. You want to pay some attention to that. They might be right. But I think the best entrepreneurs I know, they make an internal decision about when to give up or when to keep working on something. It's basically when you have run out of ideas and something is not working, then it's a good time to stop.
How long have you been meditating for, actually?
42 years.
And what got you started?
The Beatles. When the Beatles started meditating and they drew attention to it, and it was a curiosity, and I thought I would try it, and then it's changed my life. It's the biggest influence in whatever success I've had in life.
So can you remember what it was like in the first few weeks or first few months?
Yeah, I remember wrestling around with it. I remember that, you go into the mantra. I went into the mantra, then the thoughts would come back, and it would be that back and forth. And then as it got better and better, and I got deeper into it, the thoughts would become more valuable, more tantalizing. And it was almost, more of a temptation to think about those particular thoughts because I didn't want to lose those ideas. And then I knew that I had to push those away. And it was almost difficult. And then after a while, I remember then disappearing into it. And that was something. The first benefits were that ability to have the quietness, the tranquility, the ability to get energy from it rather than sleep. It would provide me more energy than sleeping. Those kinds of benefits. But then it went on to develop an ongoing equanimity, that centeredness, that ability to go above myself and my circumstances and to look down at them from a higher level with a clarity and an objectivity. And then it started to bring out my subconscious and my creativity, because subsequently I've studied neuroscience. I've been very interested in that. And I've learned that there's part of our brain in the neocortex, which is where imagination exists, which is where creativity exists. And it opened me to that. I experienced it. I didn't understand what was happening at the time, but it provided those things as time went on.
As I've grown older, I've learned to appreciate living in the moment, and I ask that you do too. I'm asking this graduating class, those of you here, I've asked all of my viewers in America and across the world to do this one thing. Keep a grateful journal. Every night, list 5 things that happened this day, in days to come, that you are grateful for. What it will begin to do is to change your perspective of your day and your life. I believe that if you can learn to focus on what you have, you will always see that the universe is abundant and you will have more. If you concentrate and focus in your life on what you don't have, you will never have enough. Be grateful. Keep a journal.